I'm Alex Dykes, and today we're out in the forest taking a look at the 2015 Volkswagen eGolf, logically Volkswagen's electric car in the United States. This also happens to be the latest Golf available in the United States, riding on Volkswagen's new MQB platform. If you want to know more about the Golf itself, there will be a separate video coming up in the next few weeks on that. This video is going to be focusing mostly on the electric version. The front end looks very much like the regular gasoline Golf, except we have some closed off grille areas and a blue stripe right across here to show that something electric this way comes. Down lower we have these C-shaped accent strips that are LEDs, and our particular model has the LED headlamps. These were standard initially on the eGolf. However, Volkswagen has recently announced that there's going to be a lower end trim of the eGolf that does away with the LED lamps, as well as a few other features to help drop the price. Because blue is the new green, we also have a Volkswagen logo with blue accents. As usually happens with modern vehicles, the Golf has grown over time, and it's now only a few inches shorter than a Ford Focus hatchback. The growth over time has largely come right back here in the rear passenger compartment, which is a lot more accommodating than many of the previous Golf generations. The Golf still retains this very vertical rear hatch, which helps improve cargo practicality a great deal versus some of the more sloping vehicles that you find out on the market. This is still a little bit more canted forward, however, than I would like. We get some additional badging on the side to denote that this is the electric Golf, and we get unique wheels and tires on this model. The wheels help reduce drag and the tires help reduce rolling resistance. You should know that in addition to these being low rolling resistance rubber compounds, they're also narrow at 205 width tires. As we've come to expect from Volkswagen, the design out back is elegant and restrained. We get these new tail lamp modules, which help integrate it better into the rest of the Volkswagen family. Obviously, we don't have any exhaust tips, but we do have very well integrated front and rear parking sensors. And the Volkswagen logo is where you'll find not only the release for the hatch, but also the backup camera. So this does flip open like that to reveal the backup camera when you put the vehicle in reverse. Motivating the eGolf is a 115 horsepower electric motor. It also produces 199 pound-feet of torque. That's about the same amount of torque that you'll find out of many of the turbocharged entries in this segment. It's mated to a single-speed transaxle, sending power right here to the front wheels. Powering the electric motor is a 24.2 kilowatt-hour lithium-ion battery pack. It's air-cooled rather than liquid-cooled like you'll find in some of the vehicles out there, and it's slung low right underneath the body of the entire Golf. Taking a closer look under the hood, you can see how much smaller this motor is than the gasoline engine that the Golf normally receives. You'll also see that we have an underbody aerodynamic panel right down there below the electric motor and transaxle that helps improve aerodynamic efficiency. The charging port is located right back here on the passenger side. This is where you will find the standard J1772 charging port for level 1 and level 2 charging. You'll also find the DC quick charge port. This vehicle uses the brand new CCS, also known as the SAE Combined Charging Standard connector. It basically takes this connector, adds some DC charging pins on the bottom, plugs in right there on the same connector. This is very different than the Leaf or the Kia Soul, which use a secondary connector for DC fast charging, known as the CHAdeMO standard. In EV terminology, what I'm holding right here is not a charger. This is actually an EVSE or electric vehicle supply equipment. That's what actually provides the power to the car, because the charger for the battery is actually part of the car itself. And this vehicle uses a 7.2 kilowatt charger, which is one of the faster ones available on the market right now. That means that charging rates depend on the power source you provide the car. So if you give it 110 volts, charging can take up to 26 hours. If you have access to a level 2 EVSE that's capable of a 7.2 kilowatt draw, then charging times can take about 3 hours. If you have access to a DC fast charge station, you can get from 0 to 80% in about 30 minutes. Front seat comfort is excellent. We have a multi-way adjustable driver's seat, but only the recline function is actually powered. We adjust the height via this handle right over here, and the fore and aft movements via a handle right below the front of the seat. We do have a manually adjustable lumbar support, which does help improve driver comfort. There's also a manual tilt telescopic steering column with a decent range of motion, and overall the front seats come in at 8 out of 10 points. In the back, we have a little bit more room than I expected. The Golf is a very upright vehicle, and that really does help improve rear passenger comfort. These seat bottom cushions are a little bit close to the floor for my tastes, but they should be a little bit more comfortable for children. Sitting right here behind myself, I have about 3 inches of legroom left. If I move over to the right side of the vehicle, where this front seat was all the way back in its tracks, I have a little bit less room, and even though this is a front-wheel drive vehicle, there is still a noticeable hump in the middle. That means that when you sit in the middle seat, your legs don't really have an ideal place to go, but I still have a reasonable amount of headroom, about 1.5 inches left. Overall, I'm going to give these rear seats 9 out of 10 points. In addition to a pull-down center armrest with 2 very large cup holders, there's also a center pass-through right here in the middle of this split 60/40 folding bench seat. That means that you can put long items right through without folding the rear seats down. Cargo practicality has long been a Golf strong suit, and that continues in this version. If I open the rear hatch, you'll find a little bit more cargo room back here than you might expect. This 24-inch roller bag is on its side. You can definitely stack up a number of them across the back, but you cannot put this 26-inch roller bag in the same position. Like most vehicles in this category, the Golf does not use a roller tonneau cover, making this a little bit less practical because you will need to take it out and leave it somewhere. You can't just roll it up and put taller items in the back. Also in the cargo area, you'll find a grocery bag holder, 12-volt power outlet, cargo tie-down D-ring right there, and the jack in a little bag right over here on the side. If we lift the cargo load floor, this is where you would have found the spare tire in a normal Golf, but we don't have one in the eGolf. If I remove that from the vehicle, we have some additional storage space right under there. That does make this cargo area an awful lot taller. It allows me to put this 24-inch roller bag in that position and still close the hatch. Thanks to the additional trunk space under this cargo load floor and some very nice helper handles on either side of the hatch, I'm going to give this 9 out of 10 points when it comes to my exclusive trunk comfort index. Up front, all models get height adjustable seat rests and two-way adjustable headrests for both the driver and the front passenger. One thing to note is that initially all eGolfs used this imitation leather seating surface, but now there is a cloth base version available. I have to say that I'm not a fan of this imitation leather upholstery. Although it is perforated for supposedly added ventilation, it doesn't breathe as well as cloth or real leather. Moving over to the front door panels, you notice an immediate improvement in terms of interior quality versus the last generation Golf in the United States. We have an awful lot more soft touch plastics going on. We have soft touch plastics all along the upper part of the door, the middle portion of this armrest, and the door insert right there as well. Even beyond those areas, when we look down here at this bottle holder and storage cubby down at the bottom of the door, it is now covered in fabric rather than just leaving it all hard plastic. The same thing applies when we move on over to the dashboard. The Audi-like levels of fit and finish quality have finally returned again to the Golf, and we have a lot more soft touch plastics going on over here as well. We also have A-pillars that you'll notice right there in the center of your screen that are fabric coated rather than being hard plastic. Obviously, as with most cars in this category, you will find harder plastics lower in the dashboard, but fortunately they're well out of the reach of most people. We do have a very accommodating glove box there, easily able to accommodate large tablet computers. Also in the glove compartment, we have the control for the air conditioning vent for the glove compartment because it is air conditioned. You'll find the single disc optical player and the SD 1 and 2 card slots for that same interface. One can be used for music, the other is used for navigation. And then over on this side, we have some holders for business cards and other SD cards, etc. And they have some additional holder slots right there on the left side of that infotainment unit as well. The center console gets an all-new look for 2015. We have two large air vents right up here, and then we have an all-new infotainment system. If you want to know more about this, go ahead and click that banner at the bottom of your screen. You'll be taken on over to a dedicated review on that. In a nutshell, the software has been almost completely redesigned. We now have the ability to swipe across the screen like you'll find in some of the competition. We also have vastly improved voice commands and better media integration. An interesting touch with the system is that this strip right down here below the screen is actually a proximity sensor. So as I get my hand closer to the screen, you'll notice it changes a little bit because it can actually detect how close you are to it. In addition to this screen being slightly smaller than I would like, my only other complaint is that in this EV model, we don't have any screens in this system that would tell me how long it would take to get my vehicle completely charged. So a lot of vehicles out there will tell you if you charged at 120 volts, it would take this long, at 240 volts, it would take this long. There is no such screen in this system. You won't find that out until you actually plug in the vehicle and take a look at the multi-information display between the speedometer and the power gauge. Below the infotainment screen, we have the controls for our dual zone climate control. Our model does have the heat pump in it. Base models skip the heat pump and use a resistive heater instead. Resistive heaters will drop your range, especially if it's very cold outside, because heat pumps are more efficient. However, the most efficient thing to do is really heat the seat rather than heat the air in the cabin. Below that, we have a small storage cubby, and this is also where you'll find the USB input for your USB connected device right here. This has the Apple adapter. These are Volkswagen specific adapters. It has a proprietary end right there on that side that plugs into the Volkswagen cable in there. Then it plugs into your device over there. Different ends are available from the Volkswagen dealer. Below all of that, we have the start stop button, the drive mode button. This cycles between normal, eco, and eco plus. This very traditional looking shifter is one of my favorite features about the Golf. Right down here we have drive, but you can also click it back for B, which is enhanced engine braking or regenerative braking, however you want to look at it. And then we can click across plus and minus. The plus and minus only work when you're in D mode. So if we put it in D, you can actually adjust the regenerative braking. You can click it all the way over to the right there and turn it completely off. And then you can click it to the left and select from 3 different stages of regeneration. For the absolute maximum regeneration, we just click it down again, engage that B mode, and that will regenerate as much energy as possible. This is far superior to what you find in the BMW i3. The BMW i3 drives like it's in B all the time, because if you take your foot off the accelerator pedal, it will actually take the car to a complete stop, and it brakes fairly aggressively. This vehicle doesn't do that. You can again put it in the D mode all the way over to the right, and it will coast along with zero regenerative braking. Below that shifter, we have our electric parking brake control, small storage cubby, and two very large cup holders. There is a roller cover to cover those up when they're not in use. Moving over to the center armrest, this does slide forward and backward. It also ratchets into multiple positions and opens completely to reveal a relatively small storage cubby inside. I was only able to fit a wallet and some other very small knickknacks in there. Over on the driver's side, we find a unique instrument cluster for the EV model. We have our speedometer right over here on the right-hand side and a very traditional analog battery gauge, 0 to 100% basically. Over on the left-hand side, we find a display that you don't find in the regular gasoline vehicle. It's 0 to 100% in terms of power right over here on this side, 0 right where we are right there, 100% over there. Similar thing for charging ability over here on this side. The power availability gauge basically tells you how much oomph is available from the battery. So if the battery was too hot or too cold, you wouldn't have the maximum amount of power available from the battery. Also, if the battery was near being depleted, you wouldn't have as much oomph out of it either, and the needle would be down there towards the red section. In the middle of those two needles, we have Volkswagen's color multi-information display. The display is controlled via the buttons on the right side of the steering wheel. We change screens via these two buttons right over here. Click OK to enter, and then change options within that display with this button right over here. The phone button and the voice command button are not really used in that display, and this is the dedicated track forward-backward button for the infotainment system. The system doesn't give you as many displays as you'll find in some of the competitive products. We of course get range, which is very important, average consumption, instant consumption speed, etc. None of these screens will show you how long it will take the vehicle to charge if you plug it in, however. We have a navigation screen that would give you turn-by-turn directions, audio information if that was engaged. We also have telephone interface right here where you can pick people from your telephone address book right via this display, as you can see. We then have vehicle status, which would tell you if there's anything wrong with the vehicle, and then we're right back to driving data. Now, if we turned off this vehicle and we plugged it in, for a brief moment it would tell you how long the vehicle thought it would take to get to a complete charge right here on this screen, right down here below the range indicator right there. I didn't find that quite as useful as some of the options on the market. Zooming out, you can see we have this very attractive 3-spoke Volkswagen corporate steering wheel with a slight flat bottom right over there, sport grips right on the side, and then we have some additional buttons on the left side of the steering wheel for the cruise control, as well as the volume knob below those. You'll find another storage cubby to the left of the steering wheel, right underneath the headlamp controls. Like every other electric vehicle out there, acceleration is not really the eGolf's forte. We ran 0 to 60 just over 10 seconds, which means this is about the same speed as one of the first generation Toyota Priuses. Modern Toyota Prius would actually be a little bit faster than this to 60. Helping the eGolf out a little bit though is a very light curb weight. This is only 3,090 pounds, which means it's less than 300 pounds heavier than BMW's carbon fiber and aluminum i3. That's significantly lighter than both the Leaf and the Ford Focus Electric. Most of the EVs in this segment will accelerate right around this same speed. However, you will get a faster 0 to 60 time out of the 4-seat General Motors Spark EV, and that's primarily because that vehicle has a lot of low-end torque and not a whole lot of weight to shuttle around. It is much smaller than this, however. You'll also get a faster 0 to 60 time, of course, out of the BMW i3 or a Tesla. When it comes to braking, these relatively narrow 2.5 with tires are truly the big problem for this vehicle, but it actually stops shorter than a BMW i3. So I'm going to give this 9 out of 10 points when it comes to braking. One of the other reasons I'm going to give this 9 out of 10 points for braking in an EV is because of this adjustable regenerative system. We have the ability to choose between maximum engine braking and essentially zero engine braking. But rather than just giving you those two options, you're allowed 3 different levels of regenerative braking in between the two. It makes it an awful lot easier to drive this in heavy traffic or stop-and-go traffic because you can engage that maximum regen braking, and going down this hill right here that we're on, I'm not actually using the brake pedal. It will take this vehicle almost to a complete stop. Or when I decide I don't need any more engine braking, I can put it back into zero engine braking and then just coast down the hill, whatever is the most efficient or easiest for me to do at the time. This is an awful lot easier to drive than BMW's i3, which we recently drove with their one-pedal concept. That took an awful lot of getting used to, and it never felt very smooth out on the road. A lot of people just thought I was driving very jerky, or whatever you might want to call it, but it really had nothing to do with that. It had to do with the fact that the moment you lift your foot off the accelerator pedal, that vehicle doesn't coast. It comes to a stop. Even though we only have 2 of 5 with tires in this vehicle, handling is actually very good for an EV, thanks to the light curb weight, the low center of gravity, and the relatively good weight balance for a vehicle like this. I'm going to give this 9 out of 10 points when it comes to handling. It doesn't have the precision of BMW's rear-wheel drive i3, but it does feel a little bit better composed than the other EVs in this segment. This is without a doubt better feeling in terms of handling out on the road than the Spark or the Nissan Leaf. Ford's Focus Electric does handle a little bit better than this, but it does feel heavier out on the road, largely because it is a great deal heavier than this vehicle. Absolute handling numbers are better, but the feel isn't the same as we get in this Golf. This feels very much like an electric version of the regular Golf. The regular gasoline-only Golf is one of the better handling vehicles in this segment, even though we have electric power steering, and that does translate directly down to the eGolf. Cabin noise comes in at 8 out of 10 points. I scored 70 decibels in this vehicle. It is a very quiet cabin, which makes some of the EV noises a little bit easier to hear. The biggest of that is the sound generator under the hood that helps blind people hear that this vehicle is coming. I actually found the noise to be a little bit annoying because you can hear it so well inside the cabin, and everything else about the eGolf is very hushed. I'm going to give this 9 out of 10 points when it comes to the ride. I had expected this to be a lot firmer, but it actually isn't. It has a very good balance between handling and the ride score. But most importantly, this doesn't feel unsettled around the corners. Most of the other EVs, because of where the weight is held in the vehicle and how heavy they are versus how large they are, they tend to feel a little bit strange out on the road. The Spark EV is definitely one of those kind of EVs. It feels heavy even though it's a very small, otherwise light feeling vehicle. Normally a subcompact like that would feel very light out on the road, and the Spark EV does not feel like that. Same goes for that Ford Focus Electric. It definitely feels heavier than the regular gasoline version of the Focus. Rather than trying to reinvent the car with an electric drivetrain, Volkswagen has taken a regular old Golf and electrified it, and it really feels like a normal car out on the road. That's the best thing about the Golf in many ways. If you're looking for a car that doesn't feel too far out the norm, doesn't feel weird in any way, this is definitely the vehicle for you. All that Volkswagen has done is jam an electric motor under the hood, and that's exactly what this vehicle feels like. On the downside from that, it doesn't feel particularly futuristic in any way. We don't have an LCD disco dash going on, we don't have any fancy graphics telling you what the battery or the electric motor are doing, and we don't have any screens that tell you how long it will take to charge when you actually find a charging station. We do have a regular old analog battery gauge, which is kind of a cute little feature, but aside from that, I actually think that I would prefer a little bit more information to the driver on what the EV system is doing. Specifically, I would kind of want to know how many kilowatt hours are left in this battery. Since we have been averaging very good fuel economy in this vehicle, I'm going to give this 10 out of 10 points when it comes to fuel economy. It would help me know how much range I have if I could see how many kilowatt hours I had left in the battery. That's not something we get in this vehicle. Speaking of fuel economy, I have been averaging 4.2 miles per kilowatt hour, which is very, very good in this segment. When Volkswagen first launched the eGolf, there was only one version, the one we're taking a look at right here, which is the SEL Premium. It started at $35,495. That is, of course, before all federal and state tax incentives. But they have announced there will actually be a slightly less expensive version available as well, the Limited model for $33,450. In order to get the Limited down to that lower price point, they swapped out these alloy wheels for steel wheels, the LED headlamps for halogen headlamps, the leatherette seats for cloth seats, and there's no heat pump. The only major loss on that list is the heat pump. I could live with the steel wheels. I think I actually prefer the cloth seats to these seats, and I would be sad to see the LED headlamps go, but halogens aren't that bad. The heat pump is really the big loss here, because especially if you live in a colder climate, a resistive heater is much less efficient than a heat pump, so you will notice a decent range difference between the two, especially in really cold weather, or if you just like to use the heater a lot. You'll notice that many of the unique features on the eGolf stay even in that base model, like the heated windshield, the standard keyless go, front and rear parking sensors, 2-zone climate control, and the backup camera. When it comes to comparisons, I'm going to start off by crossing the Spark EV and the Fiat 500e off my list. They're a considerable amount smaller than this on the inside and out. They definitely require more compromises than the eGolf, the Focus Electric, the Soul EV, etc. Ford's Focus Electric is one of the least expensive entries in this segment because in addition to its low $29,170 price point, Ford has some aggressive incentives as well. Its range isn't quite as long at 76 miles versus this vehicle's 83-mile range according to the EPA, but you do get a little bit more power under the hood. Like the new base model of the eGolf, that Focus Electric also comes with cloth seats, although real leather is available, and it's not available in any trim of the eGolf. It does handle slightly better because of its wider tires, but that also means it's less efficient. There's also no quick charge port available at all in that Focus Electric, and it is standard on the eGolf. The 6.6 kilowatt hour charger that's standard on the Focus is also slightly slower than this model, so if you have the ability to charge at 7.2 kilowatts in this vehicle at home or at work, you will gain range faster. Although the Focus Electric handles better and it feels very much like the regular Focus, it is a decent amount heavier than this, and it really is noticeable out on the road. It's about 600 pounds heavier than this eGolf, even though it's really not that much larger. That weight is especially important when it comes to hill climbing because it's going to make your range drop off more rapidly in that Ford than over here in the Volkswagen. At $29,010 and the most popular vehicle with a plug in the US, the Leaf is the 900-pound gorilla in the room. Even though it's one of the older entries, it still has one of the longer ranges in the segment at 84 miles. In reality, the Leaf is going to be a little bit less expensive than that $29,000 starting point because incentives are available and you can buy a Leaf everywhere. It's not limited to certain states. I think the realistic starting price for the Leaf is the SL model, which is actually $32,950. But again, there are additional incentives from the manufacturer available, and all this pricing is again before federal and state tax incentives. The Leaf is decidedly less expensive, but it also feels a little bit cheaper on the inside. It is, however, much bigger. It has a really big cargo area, and the seats are nice and wide on the inside. Overall, it is definitely a bigger vehicle inside than the eGolf. With a little bit less power under the hood and a little bit more weight to shuttle around, that Leaf is definitely slower and it doesn't handle quite as well either. Some other considerations on the Nissan Leaf are that base model has a 3.3 kilowatt charger, so you have to step up to the SL model if you want the 6.6 kilowatt charger. That means it's going to gain range much more slowly than most of the vehicles in this segment. Definitely a lot slower than the 7.2 kilowatt charger in this model. Despite starting out with that smaller charger, all versions of the Nissan Leaf can have the optional CHAdeMO charger added. It's not a standard feature, it is an option that you have to select, but that is a little bit better than the charge port that we get in this vehicle simply because there are more stations available. At this point in time, there are over 900 CHAdeMO charging stations in the United States, and in my local area, CHAdeMO charging stations easily outnumber DC charging stations using this connector by 4 to 1. The toughest competition for the eGolf comes in the form of the Kia Soul EV. Very much like the Kia Soul, it has a particular style that may not appeal to everybody, but it is a very practical vehicle. It also is relatively inexpensive, especially when you take a look at the features that are standard. Starting at $33,700, that Soul has the longest range in this immediate segment at 93 miles. That's because it has the largest battery in this segment at 27 kilowatt hours. Like the eGolf, Kia makes the DC fast charging port standard, and it uses the CHAdeMO connector, which again is more numerous in the US at this time. It doesn't have an onboard level 2 charger that's quite as fast as this. It's 6.6 kilowatts, not 7.2, but it is very close. The Soul has a little bit less power under the hood and it doesn't handle quite as well as this vehicle, but it has significantly more cargo room than we get in the eGolf. All versions of the Kia Soul get a large 8-inch color touchscreen infotainment system with a built-in cell modem for connectivity features, smartphone integration, and some additional features that you don't find in this infotainment system. If you get the top-end Soul EV, the Plus version, for $35,700, again before federal and state incentives, then we also get leather interior and ventilated front seats. Those ventilated seats will really improve your range in the summer because, very much like heating the seats instead of heating the air in this cabin, it's much cheaper to cool the seats than cool the air in the cabin. The eGolf is practical and comfortable. It's one of the best handling vehicles in this segment. I think it also ties with the Ford Focus Electric as being the best looking in this segment. Unfortunately, it doesn't have the longest range and it's not the most practical. Those two awards go to the Kia Soul. I also find the Kia Soul's addition of that 8-inch touchscreen infotainment system and the cooled seats and real leather seats on the inside to be things that are high on my priority list. If I were shopping in this segment, I would take the Soul EV over this particular model, but I would take this definitely over a Nissan Leaf or a Ford Focus Electric. In addition, I actually think that the eGolf is a good alternative to BMW's i3. I was really surprised when I took a look at the weight figures and found this is less than 300 pounds heavier than BMW's i3, even though the i3 is a very composite vehicle. It uses carbon fiber and aluminum bits to try and reduce the weight, and it still manages to only be 300 pounds lighter than this traditional steel vehicle right here. The interior in this latest generation of Golf is very attractive. It's very Audi-like, and that really is an asset to this vehicle. Thanks for taking the time to check out this video. Again, I'm Alex Dykes, and this has been the 2015 Volkswagen eGolf. Go ahead and subscribe to my channel. There's a button down there on the bottom of your screen so you can be updated on all of my latest videos. Find me over at facebook.com/AlexNautos, over at Twitter as AlexNautos. You can always email your questions to alex@alexnautos.com. I'll see you next week.